leading these people to the gallows in Kajang prison down there just south of Kuala Lumpur. These people were also making a bit of money on the side by making sure anyone who wanted a bit of dope in the prison in those days, they could get it. Don't ask me how they paid for it, but Aaron, off and on over the years, he certainly did manage to continue on with his addiction.
So what happened to that first trial? What was the verdict?
Well, there was two separate verdicts there, Jesse. There was the verdict against Lorraine Cohen, which was one of trafficking, and she was in no uncertain terms sentenced to death by the man in Malaysia who was known as the hanging judge. He was Mr. Justice Zaidin Abdullah. So Lorraine was sentenced to death, but Aaron, as I said earlier, created this precedent in terms of Malaysian law. He was the first person to be charged with a trafficking charge in Malaysia, but to have the charge reduced to one of possession, which meant that at the end of the High Court trial, Aaron was sentenced to 20 years in jail plus a 6-stroke routine whipping with the rotan.
So, pretty tough, obviously. What happens then? A decision to appeal?
Yeah. The decision to appeal for Kapal, and I spoke to him at some length about this, was not an easy one because here he had the boy, Aaron Cohen, who effectively had beaten the noose in terms of the High Court decision. And by deciding to appeal that decision and to try and reduce the jail sentence, say, from 20 to 10 years under the appeal and to also get rid of the whipping, he also opened up the opportunity for the prosecution to come back and seek the death penalty against Aaron Cohen, which is what happened, which is what indeed happened. So for the next 2 years prior to the appeal court hearing in Kuala Lumpur, both mother and son, they lived very much under the threat of death in Penang jail. Of course, things came to a head in 1989 for the Supreme Court hearing. And once again, I was, as a journalist, just remarkably fortunate that I'd built up this relationship with Kapal Singh. And I think the thing that I remember most from those days was when one Sunday afternoon prior to the appeal beginning, Kapal Singh, Peter Williams, David Hagar and myself, we drove the 20 kilometres from downtown Kuala Lumpur to Kajang Jail, which is about 30 kilometres south of Kuala Lumpur, where the Cohens had been moved from Penang prior to the appeal. And as a journalist, you know, in New Zealand, it's virtually impossible to get anywhere near inside these jails, but I just walked in behind Kapal Singh, and initially, this is the night before the Cohens were going to find out whether they were going to live or die. We visited initially, first of all, we went to Aaron in the male section of the jail, and then the decision was made that Aaron would be transported to the women's section, and Kapal, Peter Williams, David Hagar, and myself, we would be able to chat to the two of them together in the same room in the women's section. And that was an experience that I will never forget, really, Jesse, because there we all were, and these two people were going to find out the following day whether they were going to live or die. And Lorraine, as she always did, she was far better equipped to handle the absolute toughness of the situation she was in, and she cracked hardy and she was telling all sorts of jokes, but I couldn't help but notice when she stood up, like she was shaking. She was shaking in pure fear. And her son Aaron, he told me, and this was a story which went worldwide, his words to me were at that time, he said, look, if Mum dies, I don't think I'm going to be able to handle that. And so it was a very, very poignant time, Jesse, and I suppose, as a journalist, for all the wrong reasons, it was one of the best stories that I did manage to crack.
And so the 5 Supreme Court judges considered the evidence and made a call. Came down with their verdict, and this is how New Zealanders heard about it in August 1989.
New Zealand. Jeff Robinson and Maggie Barry here with Morning Report on Thursday the 10th of August. In the programme today, Lorraine Cohen is saved from the gallows.
Good morning. A New Zealander who spent more than 4 years under threat of death, Lorraine Cohen, will wake up in a Malaysian jail this morning knowing that she will live and will be free in 9 years or less. In a surprise decision last night, the Malaysian Supreme Court gave her the benefit of the doubt on whether she was a heroin trafficker or simply an addict, and changed the death penalty to one of life imprisonment. Her son, Aaron Cohen, has had his life sentence and 6 strokes of the cane confirmed, though the prosecution wanted him to hang. And the Cohen's lawyer, Kapil Singh, says he now intends to try to win a reduction in their sentences and save Aaron from the caning, which is very severe physical punishment, on health grounds. Lorraine Cohen says she did not expect the verdict and thanks Mr. Singh, whom she describes as brilliant. She says she will now write a book called The Woman with the Golden Arm, a reference to the fact that it was the needle marks on her arm which convinced the judges that she'd had the heroin for her own use, not for sale, and so saved her life. Meanwhile, she says, it's not too bad in prison.
I'm not happy, but I'm relieved. I'll be an old lady when I come out.
That's Lorraine Cohen, and we've got also the reaction of the lawyer Kapil Singh here.
I'm happy, certainly. I'm happy for them because they will live, and I think that is what is of paramount consideration.
So Aaron still faced that whipping, and that actually ended up happening, although they had been trying to bring that sentence down to him.
Yeah, he sure did, Jesse. Actually, at the conclusion of that trial, or should I say at the conclusion of the appeal, Lorraine and Aaron Cohen, they were seated in the dock, roughly about a metre away from myself, and during that hearing, I became very much aware that Aaron, he still did have a problem, mainly because he remarkably slept through most of those proceedings. And when the court actually told him that he was going to live and that the death penalty that the prosecution was seeking had been ruled out, he had absolutely no idea really what the decision was. And he sort of turned to me and he said, well, what's happening? And I explained to him that he was going to live and that he would have to spend 20 years in a Malaysian jail, and that he was going to be on the receiving end of a 6-stroke whipping from the rotan. And his reaction to me at that time, I realised that he was not at all happy, because living for him meant continuing to live in this hellhole which was Penang Jail. And so even though his mother had got off because of the precedent that he had set in the High Court, you could say that Aaron was not a happy chappie.
And I shudder to ask, but how horrific was the caning?
Yeah, well, that was something that I never really got to speak to Aaron about, but what used to happen when they were back in Penang, the addicts, they used to, none of them really had any idea when the caning was going to take place. And so the ideal situation was for the addicts was that they were completely stoned out of their brains when they were whipped. I'm not sure whether Aaron was able to get himself affixed to a system in that way, but for most of them it meant that they could never lie on their backs they couldn't lie on their backs for 6 weeks or so. And another great irony was that the whole proceeding was watched over by a doctor, and they were treated with iodine, but there was everybody in Penang Jail knew basically when people were being strung up to the A-frame and flogged. Pretty horrific stuff, really, but that's just the way it is, that's the way it was over there.
So when did they finally get out of prison?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I think it was about 1996. Kapal, he made numerous attempts to get the appeal seeking from Mahathir and his government to pardon them so that they could return to New Zealand. With good behaviour, they were scheduled to serve 13 years, but as it turned out, they served just 11 years. And Lorraine, ironically, she returned to New Zealand, and the great irony there is that she outlived Kapil Singh, her lawyer, by a month or two. Kapil, I think they both died, it was around 2013, 2014. But the woman who spent 5 or 6 years sort of expecting to hang in Malaysia, she outlived her lawyer. And the two of them could actually...
Hello everyone, is this for me? Did you get any of the salmon? If you're nice, then I might give you some. I was very nice, I got some. Hi. What am I talking about today? Am I talking about anything in particular? No, hi everyone, I've just had a fabulous day so far in Christchurch, where we've had a public meeting with particularly Multicultural Society and others, and we've been around here, we've been looking at salmon, at Akaroa salmon, and it's been great, and I've had some lovely tastes of it too. And we've also been, Dale Stevens, our candidate in Christchurch Central, we have been wandering around parts of Christchurch Central, having coffees, lots of selfies with people, and having a generally great time. Thanks for sorting out the weather.
Labor's campaign proper doesn't seem to have started yet.
Right.
Has the campaign started for you?
Oh, look, the campaign for me, I always say, starts the day after the last election. I'm always in campaign mode, and I think that that's about respecting people and understanding that we have to really earn people's votes. So if the current government partners don't wish to campaign, that's fine.
What do you make of the findings from the Heron inquiry?
Well, I'm not at all surprised. I thought that the findings were absolutely on par with my own thoughts about what had happened and what should have happened. And I would say that it's a very big lesson to people that you can't play politics with other people's private medical records.
Is there any more action that needs to be taken?
Well, I think that the main person involved in this, Miss Bogue, she's resigned from the National Party. I hasten to add that she was president almost 20 years ago for a short period of time, and she's made a very bad mistake. Hamish Walker, the MP, who was obviously someone who was quite close to Miss Bogue, he has lost his career, which is a pretty big step for someone. And I think, we've done what we can do, but I also understand that the State Services Commission has said to the Ministry of Health that the way that they sent out people's data was not optimal.
Hamish Walker is still drawing down a taxpayer's salary. What's he doing to earn it?
Well, he's reporting to me actually every couple of days, and he is around his electorate. He's visiting. It's one of the largest general electorate seats. I think it is the largest general electorate seat in the country. When I spoke to him today, he was working on something in relation to maternity care, and 2 days ago when I spoke to him then, he was visiting flood-damaged parts of Milford Sound in a valley whose name has just escaped me, but he's getting out and about and he's reporting directly to me on what he's doing, so I'm satisfied he's doing his job.
Do you agree that Chris Hipkins, with what he said, that it's disgraceful and grubby?
Well, it's certainly not something that we condone at all in the National Party, and I think that's been pretty obvious.
On the Heron report, do you think Michelle Bogue and Hamish Walker have got off lightly?
No, I thought that the Heron report said pretty much exactly what I thought it would probably say. I'm an experienced lawyer. Obviously, Mr. Heron is a Queen's Counsel and former Solicitor General. I thought he stated exactly as it should have been.
Why did Nick Smith pull out of the nation's cannabis debate?
I'm not sure. I wasn't aware of that.
Can we expect another resignation?
No, I'm not expecting anything.
Just on Hamish.
But the Labour Party might have. Who knows? Any party, you never know with people. But I'm certainly not expecting anything from Nick Smith, and that I think he's very dedicated towards winning the Nelson seat again.
Just on Hamish Walker again, is it appropriate for him to stay on as MP given what's happened recently?
Yes, I think the thing is that he's made a big error of judgment, and it was a very foolish and totally unwise thing for him to do. He's actually lost his career. What he hasn't done is he hasn't, so far as we're aware, committed a criminal offence. But he certainly has been able. He's obviously there's an issue there that he has displayed poor judgment, and we've taken that very seriously.
Have you asked any of your MPs, including Todd Muller and Nikki Kay, if they received any information from Michelle Bowen?
Well, they both said to me that they haven't received anything, and I note that the Heron report doesn't make any comment that they did. So they've told me that. I believe them. I found them both to be honourable members.
How many state houses did National build in its 9 years in government?
Well, it's actually around 3,000 of the state and community. So the National Party doesn't differentiate between social housing as to who's the provider, but it's around 3,000.
Jackie Dean this morning said more like 30,000. How did she get it so wrong?
She just got it wrong. I mean, she's relatively new in the portfolio. And Jackie has already apologised to me. I think she's apologised to the media, and she's corrected it. She's embarrassed about it. I tell you what, she'll never make that mistake again. But the best thing is, she never promised to build 100,000 houses knowing she couldn't do it.
And how can you convince the country then that Jackie Dean is housing minister material?
I tell you what, she'll never make that same mistake.
What do you make of the Prime Minister announcing the funding for the Nainai Pools this morning when the government already announced the funding package at the start of the month?
So we had a re-announcement of an announcement. Well, gosh, would we be surprised? I think that the government, and particularly the Prime Minister, is a little bit prone to announcing or re-announcing announcements, and it's only, the same month. So, that makes a difference from re-announcing 100,000 houses that were never going to happen.
With the exit of so many MPs of late, did you have an in-house conversation with them that if you've got any skeletons in the closet, now's the time to bring them out prior to it coming out in the election?
Yes, I did. I had that discussion in the first full caucus that I chaired, and I've made it very plain that people are always going to make mistakes, and that's not the issue for me. It's best just to own up and deal with it, and we'll try and support people through all those mistakes. People also have health issues that we need to support them through. But it's best if something does happen that they let me know straight away. And sometimes we can obviously mitigate situations, and other times we can't.
Presumably there was nothing that flared up, otherwise they wouldn't be here now.
Well, you'd be right on that one. Yep.
Just on Hamish Walker again, did the party ask him to resign immediately?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't the leader when Hamish announced that he was retiring from Parliament at this election, and I'm not going to revisit a decision that's been made by the former leader.
Do you think he should have?
No, I think that it's a big call. He is actually working hard in his electorate, and I'd also say that having had the former leader Todd Muller make the decision with Hamish, that I am going to respect that decision. I'd also remind people that it's not possible to remove electorate MPs a few months out from election unless they want to go.
Ms Collins, may I ask, with this litany of issues over the last few weeks, has this mortally wounded the public's trust in National as a party so little time out from the election?
No, I mean, I think it's a good question. It's very important that people realise that we are a House of Representatives, that clearly there have been some issues that I thought were very, very unfortunate and deeply unwise, and also people's privacy was breached in a totally unacceptable manner, and I feel very much for the 18 people whose privacy was breached. But I think what it shows is that sometimes we have to clean up a few issues, and I've dealt with those issues, I thought, pretty quickly. People have been pretty generally happy with the way that I've dealt with them, and certainly the caucus, I think, feels that they've been sorted.
There are the results of a fresh poll coming back imminently.
Yep.
Do you feel that National is likely to have made up some of the ground that it clearly had lost since the last one?
Well, I think that there's always issues that we have to deal with, and I just think that people are saying to us, and certainly I'm hearing it out there, that they're really happy with the way that we've been operating the last couple of weeks. We've had to deal with some big issues. It's really tough to sometimes deal with them, and it's awful being in the media for all the wrong reasons. So what we're doing is very focused on the people of New Zealand. We're worried far more, not about ourselves, but for the 200,000 people who are on the unemployment benefit, and for the 360,000 New Zealanders who are currently getting a wage subsidy which ends on the 1st of September. So we're being very focused. I'm focusing everyone on having dealt with these situations back onto the people who we represent and who expect us to work for them.
What do you make of Claire Curran saying it will take an MP killing themselves before the media takes a good look at itself?
Do you know, I think Claire Curran went through a particularly hard time. As you know, she resigned from being a minister and announced her resignation as at this coming election. I feel for Claire because I think she's clearly still extremely hurt, and I think that it is really important for everyone, whether it's MPs, media or anyone else in the country, to remember that MPs are actually only human beings. They, from time to time, are going to mess up. Doesn't mean to say we have to drive them and bully them to the way in which I think some people feel that some have.
There's been some really nasty rumours floating around at the moment, and some of them are quite
Are they about me?
I haven't heard.
That's a
of
nice change. Nice change.
What's your take on that? They seem to be. They haven't seen the light of day in the media, but they've seen the light of day in social media.
Yeah, look, it's very easy for people to be anonymous keyboard warriors, and I think that it's really awful because we like to try and keep focused very much on the people. People, the population who vote for us or even other parties, they don't want us talking about anything other than how we can do our job better for them. And they don't like all the nastiness. They actually just want us to work together. I mean, if you went out there and did a straw poll on people and said, should all the parties work together for a common goal? Tell you what, about 98% would say yes, because they actually want us focused on the people. And so I think it's very counterproductive. I've certainly said to our caucus, since I've been the leader, I've just said, if you hear any rumours about other people's stuff, just leave them where they are and go and tell the party leader of whoever that person is, leave us out of it. I don't want us involved.
So policy over personal?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, this country is starting to go through an economic crisis. The last thing people vote us for is to go around worrying about what's in, what skeletons in people's closets. They don't want that. They just want us to focus on them. So that's what we're doing.
And just touching on your time earlier today in New Brighton, you had some quite passionate talks with the multicultural community out there. What did you take from your discussions, particularly around managed isolation? They were quite passionate on.
I think people are very worried in the multicultural communities in New Zealand that they're just being forgotten altogether. They're worried that the managed isolation isn't actually. No, it's not that it's not being managed. It's just simply there's not enough places, but also they're feeling very much as though people do need to, when they come back to New Zealand, they do need to contribute financially for it, because the people who tend to get targeted when communities are under stress are actually the newer entrants to our communities. I've been Minister of Ethnic Communities in 2 terms of government. I know those communities very well. I understand their fears, and there's quite a lot of fear there.
What do you hope to do to address some of their concerns?
Well, I think one of the things that they're saying is that they don't want to be targeted by people. They also want to know that the managed isolation system can actually work properly and more efficiently. But they also are very worried that there's not enough managed isolation places. So they're asking for some answers on that, and obviously we're thinking about how we can actually address that as well.
You've hinted at some quite big policy announcements.
Yes.
Would this be a good time to sort of make mention of a few?
Do you
of
know
them?
what? What do they say? The world loves a trier, isn't it? The Lord loves a trier. Yeah, no, it's not going to happen today. I have done some this week, and there'll be more coming up. But I'm really enjoying being able to focus on policy and not worrying about who's done what, where, and with whom.
broadly this time of the last election, Labour gave Christchurch, where you've been in the central city today, a nice big $300 million handout to help its ongoing recovery from the earthquakes. Is there anything in the pipeline from National?
Well, I remember when the earthquakes happened, I think we put $9 billion in straight into the from the Crown account. So I thought we did a big job there. But there are certainly some things that I can tell you right today, and that is that we will make sure that the car park at the Christchurch Hospital is moved to just on the correct side of Hagley Park, and that people will not be expected to have to park on one side of Hagley Park, either bus over, walk over, ride a bike over, or whatever, to visit people in the hospital or even to attend outpatient clinics. So we are going to be I am making that today a promise, and it will happen. And I've discussed it with Jerry Brownlee, who of course, as you all know, is absolutely passionate about Christchurch, so that will be happening.
May I ask, there is a national candidate for Banks Peninsula seat.
Yes, Catherine Chu. Yep.
Yes, Catherine Chu. Yes, she is a serving city councillor on the Canterbury District Health Board, and she is also employed by BNZ Bank. There have been suggestions from some quarters that she should perhaps return her salary to the council while she is campaigning, so that there's a nice delineation of her work. What is your view on that? Is it fair that she should keep her council salary while she's campaigning?
It's not something that I've known about. I'll obviously take some advice, but I'll also say this, is that I'm sure she's doing an excellent job. She's a highly qualified, very energetic campaigner. So I'll certainly get some advice on it, but I'm not going to make an off-the-cuff comment because I wasn't aware of it.
There was a Labour candidate in Palmerston North who made a similar pledge yesterday.
Right. Well, good body for him. I'll get my own advice, thanks. Sure. I don't get advice from the Labour Party. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.